Picture this, dear viewer. So you have finally become a socialist. You've read Marxist theory, maybe a little bit of Kropotkin. We can't forget about him. You understand the evils of capitalism and fascism. After all of this research, you've decided to join leftist forums or social media. Discord, Reddit, God forbid 4chan. Anyways, you join with high hopes that you will find like-minded individuals who care about the liberation of the proletariat. But wait, this guy is praising Stalin, and this other guy is glazing Mao, and one of them has said North Korea is actually a democracy. My friend, you have stumbled into Tankies.
Viva la FOI y la CNT, luchemos hermanos contra los tiranos y los requetés.
What is a Tankie? A Tankie is commonly seen as an authoritarian socialist who likes Marxism-Leninism, Maoism, Juche, Pol Pot theory. Tankies also love to defend state capitalist dictatorships such as China, Vietnam, the Soviet Union, and even fucking North Korea. Now, from a libertarian socialist perspective, these are 100% not our friends. But why are they not our friends? I'm going to do a deep explanation in this video. But before we can get into the cringe that MLs are today or always have been, we have to look at the history first. So let's go back to 1917 Russia. During 1917, World War I was still storming on. We know much about the horrors of battles on the Western Front such as Ypres, the Somme, Verdun, and many others. We, however, do not learn much about the Eastern Front. The Eastern Front was about 100 times more horrible than the Western Front, with soldiers having bad equipment and a low amount of supplies. A lot of soldiers didn't have guns, those who did have guns didn't have bullets. The amount of Russian casualties ranged from 700,000 to 1,700,000 deaths. At home, it was also horrible as the poor didn't have enough to eat because of the Tsar's inefficiency. It got so bad that on March 3rd, 1917, the poor started protesting in the streets of St. Petersburg demanding more food. The Tsar would actually send soldiers to put down these protests, but an ironic twist then happened. The soldiers would join the protesters and mutiny all over the country. Finally, a revolution known as the February Revolution would then break out, forcing Tsar Nicholas to abdicate the throne. The empire would then be replaced by the liberal provisional government. There was, however, opposition to this new government, mainly the Mensheviks and the social revolutionaries. Now, the government at this time was really confusing and nuanced, with some kind of dual powership with the liberals and the socialists. Later in 1917, a man named Vladimir Lenin would return from exile along with his fellow Bolsheviks Leon Trotsky and Joseph Stalin. We will definitely get to him in this video. Now, Lenin did not like the provisional government. They were a bourgeois government. Finally, in October 1917, the Bolsheviks, Lenin's party, would then start a revolution against the provisional government. The revolution will be somewhat swift, with the Bolsheviks taking St. Petersburg. Of course, this did not completely end the provisional government. The provisional government and Tsarist would create the White Army to combat the Bolsheviks. Before we dive into the Russian Civil War, let's first talk about a certain faction in what is now modern Ukraine. What was the Black Army? The Black Army was an insurgent army in Ukraine led by Nestor Makhno. The Black Army wasn't Leninist like the Bolsheviks, but also wasn't Tsarist. It was anarchist. However, at times, the Black Army did ally itself with the Bolsheviks against the White Army more than a few times. However, this was an alliance that naturally couldn't last. Leninism, the ideology of the Bolsheviks, named after Vladimir Lenin himself, which itself is authoritarian, with the main tendencies of the ideology being a strict vanguard party with high authority, to a dictatorship of the proletariat, which in this case was a dictatorship of the Bolshevik party, to even suppressing political enemies such as non-Leninist Marxists, like the Mensheviks, to the Council Communists, and even the anarchists. The Bolsheviks couldn't tolerate an enemy that could rival their authority. During the Ukrainian War of Independence, which was from 1917 to 1921, the Bolsheviks, the Black Army, and the Ukrainian Provisional Government were battling it out for control over Ukraine. The Bolsheviks actually betrayed their anarchist ally and invaded the Black Army from 1920 to 1921. This invasion would result in a Bolshevik victory, ending the anarchist Black Army. This is the first of the many times authoritarian leftists betrayed the libertarian socialist. Now, if any Marxist-Leninist is watching this video, I know what you're thinking. But the Black Army were bandits. I'm not saying the Black Army was perfect. In fact, the Black Army did a lot of bad things, like a lot of their members were kind of bandits. But the Black Army undoubtedly committed the least war crimes and horrible acts than anyone in the storm that the Russian Civil War was. They were undoubtedly the best of all factions. Okay, let's step away from the Bolsheviks betraying and brutally murdering their anarchist allies. But surely this was a one-time thing. You would actually be wrong. In 1921, Soviet sailors, naval infantrymen, and civilians stationed in the port city of Kronstadt, which is located on Kotlin Island, got really tired of the Bolsheviks just being authoritarian assholes, took over the island, and demanded for reforms such as a reduction of Bolshevik party power, letting anarchists into the Soviets, economic freedoms for the peasants and workers, and more rights for the working class. Basic things that the Bolsheviks promised to give. How did the Bolsheviks respond? Bolshevik party member Leon Trotsky gave the order to crush the mutiny. The Red Army, led by Vladimir Lenin, Leon Trotsky, and others, later invaded the island to put down the rebels. The Bolsheviks invaded the island and put down the mutiny. Mutiny soldiers that survived fled to Finland. Around 1,000 soldiers and civilians of the mutiny were killed in battle, and around 1,200 to 2,100 soldiers and civilians that mutinied were executed. Hundreds of prisoners were killed in Kronstadt when the jails in Petrograd were full. All because they wanted a fair society that the Bolsheviks wouldn't give them. This sadly wouldn't be the last time a betrayal like this would happen. The May Days. Probably the most known of these betrayals, when the pro-Stalin Marxist-Leninists in Spain betrayed and shot down the anarchists in the streets of Catalonia. The Spanish Civil War, like the Russian Civil War, had a shit ton of factions ranging from the liberals to the fascists to the Carlists to the Marxist-Leninist and anarchist. The anarchist and the Marxist-Leninists were mostly at odds with one another. Anarchism is an anti-state ideology, while Marxist-Leninism depends on a state. That's always authoritarian, by the way. The anarchist CNT mostly held power in Catalonia. The CNT would ally itself with POUM, which was an anti-Stalinist communist party in Spain, which famously George Orwell fought for, so that's neat. Obviously, the CNT did not get along with the Marxist-Leninists and would engage in street fights known as the May Days. The Marxist-Leninists, along with the liberals, put down and killed Catalonian anarchists, which led to the destruction of the anarchists in Spain. Well, this is the end. But before I go, I'm going to ask you, the viewer, what we learned today. What was the moral of this story? Don't trust Tankies. They're going to betray us.